a ruling by a California judge. California must consider earlier parole for potentially thousands of sex offenders, including those convicted of pimping children, according to a state judge. Now, this is Sacramento County Superior Court Judge Alan Sumner in a preliminary order. He's ordering prison officials to rewrite parts of the regulations of Prop 57, the infamous Prop 57 that's emptied the jails, the 2016 ballot measure that allows consideration of earlier parole for most state prison inmates, but Governor Brown promised voters all sex offenders would be excluded. However, as predicted, that's illegal because the ballot measure was what it was. The language of the ballot measure is the ballot measure. And Jerry Brown just doesn't get to change the language of it after it's approved by the voters, after he conned people into voting for it. So while the judge might seem like the judge has lost his mind, the judge is actually, in my opinion anyway, actually following the law. It's a terrible law. To talk to us about this right now is the president of the Association of Los Angeles Deputy District Attorneys, Michele Hanisee. Welcome back to the show, Michele Hanisee.
Thank you so much, and good morning.
I don't disagree with the judge's ruling as much as I loathe the reality of it. I think that he's right in pointing out that you can't pass a ballot measure and then just change it. That's the whole purpose of a ballot measure.
Exactly what you just said is correct. The judge is following the law. And all the opponents of 57 warned the governor. They said you cannot have everyone eligible and then make certain groups ineligible after the fact. And this is, as you recall, why he called and left a scathing phone message for Sheriff Margaret Mims when she said that 290 registrants, sex offender registrants, were going to be released.
And, of course, it's amazing, Michele, how many stories we cover here that become disasters that were not only predictable, they were predicted. On a local issue, the trash monopoly that the city of Los Angeles created. But when it was first proposed, I'm hardly a genius. I'm going to say, you're creating a monopoly. How is this going to work out for the city of Los Angeles, for the people of Los Angeles, I should say? But Prop 47, 57, AB 109, all of these things, everybody took a look at them, said, this is going to cause a huge problem. It solves the problem for the politicians of prison overcrowding. But if we just simply legalize everything, then, yeah, you could say, look at what we did for crime. But it's made the streets more dangerous.
Well, they keep talking about alternatives to rehabilitation, but the only alternative they found is let all the violent criminals out of prison. And that's not a really great alternative for our communities. Every community statewide, and I don't care what the stats say, is seeing rising theft rates, and very frequently underreported rising theft rates. Home burglaries, car burglaries, shoplifting from stores.
Yeah, because essentially we turned, as we all know, if you steal under $950, up to $949, it's a misdemeanor, and these things get pled down to nothing, and that's a huge problem. It's an enormous problem.
Even if they don't get pled down to nothing, someone who gets sentenced today to 180 days in county jail will walk in and out the door on the same day because there's no room in jail to house misdemeanor offenders because the jails are now housing the felons that got transferred there because the state didn't want to pay to house them anymore.
It's fascinating that we've been sued, the city has been sued, and the police department, LAPD, has been sued for quote-unquote patient dumping, hospitals, there was a big cause celeb when one of the city council members accused the LAPD of dumping a homeless person at a bus shelter when he was actually giving him a ride. But that's essentially what Prop 57 is doing. It's criminal dumping. It's inmate dumping. They're dumping the state penitentiary felons into the county system and then saying we solved the problem while denying that they've just simply transferred the problem to the county and created a much worse problem because if you're filling up county with felons, then where do the misdemeanor offenders go? They go home.
Well, they go back into our communities. You're exactly right. The state has decided to save money by shifting all their problems to the local communities, and that's what they've done.
We're talking with Michele Hanisee, who's the president of the Association of Los Angeles Deputy District Attorneys. Their website is LAADDA.com. And she's got a blistering memo out this morning called "We Told You So," and now so is a court. And it's exactly right. I mean, this is a case where this was predictable and predicted, and now we're living with the consequences of it. So, this is above my pay grade, but we've seen this many, many times. These things end up on the ballot, and the big politicians and the big interests that want these things seem to have endless pots of money to shove them through into campaign, and Governor Brown and all of the politicians can use their bully pulpits to mislead the voters into supporting these things. But to undo the damage requires Herculean efforts on the part of citizens to organize themselves, to raise money, to create, get signature collectors, because anything that's done by ballot measure has to be undone by ballot measure, unless, of course, the courts intervene, which they haven't. So, that's where we're stuck. We're stuck with these things because they're part of the California Constitution now.
It does always come back to the citizens to undo the harm caused by our dishonest politicians. That's been true as long as California's been operating, it seems. But there is, once again, a measure underway supported by law enforcement, supported by community groups that will undo some of these more ridiculous and unpromised aspects of AB 109, Prop 47, Prop 57. It's a ballot initiative that they're gathering signatures for right now. So if you see them in front of your local Starbucks or your local Costco, go sign this thing because they need signatures to qualify it for the ballot. It's called the Reducing Crime and Keeping California Safe Act of 2018.
I've always been curious. I'm not going to ask you to betray confidence, but I'm curious if you can offer some insight to this, because we have seen, it's been my observation anyway, that there's a schism always between the appointed law enforcement, the heads of departments that are appointed by politicians, and those who are elected, and the professional corps that, politicians come and go, but they're working the streets. And I'm always curious, when there's a behind closed door meeting on things like this, do they continue to defend this crap, or do they say, look, it is what it is, and we're just sort of stuck with it? I mean, I'm just curious because they have to be looking at the same data that you're looking at.
Now, your observations are the same as mine. Elected officials are answerable to the public and do answer to the public, I think, more honestly. An appointed official can be unappointed. They can be fired. So they are always mindful of what their political bosses want them to say. And very frequently they end up not sticking up for what they know is right just because it could cost them their job.
It shouldn't be that arbitrary, but it is. And the thing is that the politicians will then use the appointed criminal justice authorities, law enforcement people, as their protective coloration, basically. When there's blowback on something, they say, well, we have the backing of law enforcement. Well, not really. You have the backing of the law enforcement that works for you, but the law enforcement that's working for the people may have a very different point of view, and oftentimes do. At least that's been my experience over the last 20 years.
Yeah, that you're seeing what I'm seeing. I think it's a very thinly guarded secret, if it's a secret at all. But once again, it's coming down to the citizens and also law enforcement groups. And I have to really put in a kind word for the law enforcement unions, who again and again have given up their hard-won dues money that they get from their members to protect their members' rights, and use that instead for pro-justice law enforcement initiatives and to fund things like this signature gathering. They really put their money where their mouth is.
Hey, as always, Michele, we appreciate you coming on and speaking on this incredibly important topic. Michele Hanisee, president of the Association of Los Angeles Deputy District Attorneys, LAADDA.com.